Thanks a lot, Sanjay, and welcome everyone to the Vive MarTech Fest 2021. So today, I would like to talk to you about assembling the right marketing team. And we've prepared a very short presentation of a few thought starters to give you some tips and advice on the topic. So before I jump in, I wanted to share a few words about myself. I'm originally French. I've lived and studied and worked in 7 different countries. I've been in Dubai for the past 9 years, and I've been really privileged to work for 4 iconic brands from the region and in the region. I thought today the topic was really great for me to reflect on my experience in marketing and in the region and share this with you. So on the menu today, assembling the right team. This is going to be short, so a few ideas, but hopefully you will find them useful and relevant. First, I would like to talk to you about my personal views on 4 strengths that marketing teams need to master, how that impacts your approach to recruitment, and I would like to share one best practice that I personally find very useful, and hopefully it will be relevant for you if you are managing a team, but also potentially if you are looking for your next role. And then finally, I would like to introduce to you my 3 best friends, which maybe are not who you might expect, but that should be an interesting conversation. So let's get started. So first, when I think about assembling teams, I mean, obviously, I think the world of marketing today has become very technical. I think there is a lot of jargon, but if we take a step back, the way I look at the landscape is these 3 fundamental strengths that are constantly in tension. And I think this is what makes marketing really exciting, is that in the same day, you're really asked to combine these different strengths and to get your brain in different territories. So one dimension is our ability to be on the strategic front and to really conceptualize and plan. But at the other hand, the ability to execute is fundamental to success. And you can imagine how these things can be easily in opposition. And then in a similar way, I think it used to be that marketing was thought as being a very creative, kind of gut feel driven and very empirical discipline. But nowadays, I think we all know that it's also become something that is very data driven and very analytical. And I think as marketers, we find ourselves constantly stretched between these different dimensions. And if I try to map some of the some examples of disciplines, you can see how they can easily fit into different territories. Sorry. Along these 2 axes. Mind you, sometimes I think there can be a bit of a judgment of what is what. So I think when you think about brand campaign, I think depending on the organization and the people, it can be a very data-driven, analytical approach, or it can be something that is a bit more driven by experience and gut feel and empirical findings. Same things when you think about product innovation, for example. There is a school of thought that think that it's really data driven and based on research, and then you have lots of examples of successful products that were born out of great ideas and inspirations. So I really like this framework because it's a good way to step back and think about our teams and the type of capabilities that we have. So you can see, you can imagine how you can use this framework to simply evaluate potentially yourself as an individual, people in your team, but also an overall teams, right? So if you start overlaying the different areas of expertise of your teams, you might find a pattern in terms of finding that, okay, maybe it's a team that is extremely driven towards execution and operational, but doesn't have enough of strategic thinking power, or maybe it's a team that is extremely data driven, but doesn't leave room for gut feel and experience. And I think nowadays it's really important to balance out these different skills. And I think this can be both a good tool in terms of stretching individuals and asking them to operate in different front at different cycles of their careers and on different projects. But it's good also to identify gaps and potentially direct a bit your recruitments towards certain profiles that will bring you this complementarity across the whole scope. I think nowadays there are often some gaps when it comes to data-driven approach, marketing technology understanding, which can be really easily identified with this framework. Once you've identified some of these gaps, the question is, how do you find the right talents? And here I felt it was really important for me to reflect on my personal experience in the region, because I think this is something that comes back very often, of the challenges of finding the right talent in the region. And I think nowadays, it's a bit less about the absence of talent, because I think especially in marketing, digital marketing, there's been a whole wave of businesses that have nurtured talent. And I think nowadays there is a great pool of talent to choose from, but sometimes it's still difficult to recruit in a multicultural environment, because a lot of us are expats coming from different cultures, different education systems, different careers. And when we look at recruitment, all our references are often lost, right? So what in our home market would come a bit more naturally in terms of evaluating the universities we know, the companies that we know as being good schools of marketing, good schools of finance, or if we think about our personal network, these anchor points are not easy to find when you are new in the market, and when the market is constantly fed with people with a very different background. And I think this is what's really fabulous, like this melting pot of talent is very rich, but sometimes it's hard to find the talent you need. And as I was reflecting on this, I think one of the key thing that came to my mind is that my practical experience has been to leverage a very simple technique, which is the technique of case studies. And so I thought this talk was also meant to be, very practical recommendations. And so one point I wanted to highlight is the opportunity to use and abuse of case studies, because I think in a market where talent is in all shape of forms, case studies is a very practical tool. It's a very good, in my experience, is a very good predictor of someone's future performance in a role. You can simulate real business problems. You can mix strategic questions, practical questions. You can really recruit around these wheels of the 4 strengths of marketing. And you can also evaluate both the experience, but also the potential of the person. You can also assess the motivation and the drive of the person, and the energy and the commitment that the person puts into a case. And I think what is not always acknowledged is like it's a technique that really works at all levels when you want to assemble the right team. And just to kind of illustrate, I thought I would share an example of maybe something that would be relevant for a more junior kind of analytical position of, sharing an extract of Facebook campaigns and asking the candidates to analyze the performance, present the findings, something quite basic. But in all transparency, I also wanted to share, for example, the case that I, as a CMO candidate, had to prepare for talabat, because at talabat as an organization, we are also very much convinced of the value of case studies. And so I think whether it's at entry level in a very specific functional role, or whether it's at a more managerial level, I think there is always a case that will allow you to evaluate the candidate in situ. And I think also one idea is that if you are a candidate looking for your next role, and if you're not being asked to prepare a case in the recruitment process, why not be proactive and invent your own case? And this is actually something that I've personally done many times over the years. And I think it's a fantastic way of demonstrating your motivation. But also having a very kind of informed and in-depth conversation with the recruitment team. And then as the last point, I wanted to introduce to you who I call my best friends. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because when you think about assembling the right teams, I think it's important not to think just about the marketing team itself, but also about the critical functions that are contributing to marketing success. And I think they might differ by industry, by type of companies, but I think it's really important to identify them. So in my case, most of the time, my best friends have been product, because I think nowadays in a lot of digital services, product user experience is completely a touch point of the user experience, and is entirely part of the marketing strategy. Maybe it's not always a common view, but I think finance is also an extremely important partner function when it comes to evaluate investment, evaluate performance, plan. This is I think a very strong partnership like we have in the case of talabat is really an important driver of success. And analytics is also a very important partner functions that I've really enjoyed working with over the years. I think these partner functions, it's important to create the right touch point. I think depending on the maturity of the organization, the size of the organization, there is a landscape. I think marketing can be a client of these functions on one hand. It can also be a setup of what I call blended touch points, in which each team have kind of a handover points and dedicated resources who help support the coordination. And sometimes it can even be incubated in marketing in case some organizations don't have these functions very developed. So sometimes product or marketing can be incubated within the marketing team in the case of a new e-commerce project or a digital transformation. And to conclude, I wanted to share with you a very practical experience of how my partnership with analytics has evolved over the years in different organizations, to give you a flair of how these partner functions can be set up. So if I look at, kind of back 7 years ago in the setup we had at souk.com, we had a very centralized analytics functions with dedicated marketing analytics leads. In the Emirates setup, it was a bit different in the sense that there were analytics, product and marketing under one roof, which really facilitated the collaboration. And then at Talabat, I'm very excited to have found an even more integrated model in which we have a central data governance team for the whole company that is reporting to the CTO. And then we have dedicated marketing, BI and analytics resources that are reporting directly to me, and that really foster great collaboration. So in a nutshell, this was my last point about the importance of identifying your partner function. And just to recap, I would like to leave you with these 3 takeaways and thought starters on this big topic of assembling the right team. Number 1 is to evaluate your team against my personal views of the 4 strengths of marketing and to identify the gap. Number 2 is to turbocharge your recruitment by systematically using case studies for all type of roles. And number 3 is to make sure to identify the partner functions that are going to be critical to marketing success and to set up the right touch points. Thanks a lot for your time.